So Susan Lee is a proud first-generation Korean-American immigrant. She moved here, the U.S., when she was just 9 years old, and she started her legal career as an immigration attorney at the Min Kwan Center for Community Action, where she assisted Korean and Chinese immigrant community in the greater New York City area. Susan has also provided immigration advice and handled post-conviction relief cases at public defenders' offices serving the Queens, Manhattan, and Bronx communities. Currently, she is a senior federal policy advisor at the New York City Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. She also serves as the co-chair of the board of United We Dream, the largest immigrant youth-led advocacy organization in the country. Susan is a graduate of Harvard College and the University of Oxford, as well as the Harvard Law School, where she graduated in 2015. She participated in the Harvard Immigration and Refugee Clinic, which helped her realize her passion for the work she does today. And she interned at the DOJ her 1L summer and SCAD during her 2L summer. After graduating, she joined the Immigrant Justice Corps, which is a fellowship program for recent graduates to work in immigration legal services. So welcome, Susan. And we also have Nancy Yoon. She is the AAPI Publicist for the Oscar Award-winning movie Minari. She is the founder of Asians in LA. You can find them at Asians in LA, a social network of Asian American influencers in politics, entertainment, and community nonprofits, as well as Unique Media, a PR media agency for the Asian American community in Southern California. Yoon is a digital storyteller, actor, TV host, and digital content producer. She and her Austrian husband also co-founded Europeans in LA, one of the largest social networks of Europeans in Los Angeles. As an Asian American influencer and community leader, Nancy is helping to push for diversity and inclusion for minorities, including Asian Americans and women, in entertainment, corporations, and boards. In entertainment, she has worked with the Walt Disney Company in corporate operations planning, and later at the Disney Channel in talent development and casting. She produced music specials and TV shows with diverse celebrities, such as Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, Destiny's Child, and NSYNC. And at Fox Family, she was the director of marketing, producing music specials and managing over 60 television shows. In front of the camera, Nancy has acted in numerous commercials and top television shows, including CSI Las Vegas and Days of Our Lives. Her talent extends to communications and media, including hosting for the Stars Network and representing major corporate clients worldwide, such as Adidas and Philips. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Susan and Nancy.
Hey everyone, it's such a pleasure and an honor to be with you all. And thank you so much for having us, Marie and Tony. And I'm so honored to be here with Susan Lee as well, who is the immigration and immigrant queen, as you heard from her bio. I just wanted to, and forgive me, I'm here in Gold Country, California. So we're on our first trip during COVID or after COVID. So I'm in the car at the moment, but I just thought that maybe we could both start by sharing our personal immigrant story, because Minari is all about the Korean American immigrant story, and you'll get to kind of learn a little bit more about our background. So I will start. I am the daughter of, let's see, 7 members. I have 4 sisters, so the youngest of 5 daughters. My parents are Korean American, and we came in the 70s. We came to Koreatown with a few suitcases. My mom and dad have given up so much to kind of seek that American dream with 5 daughters. And we moved to Koreatown, and I just remember all their sacrifices and working so hard. So I'm just really proud of being a part of this movie and being a part of this incredible movement for diversity in Hollywood. And Minari has been such an experience for me. So how about you, Susan, if you want to kind of just share your immigrant story?
Yeah. So my family and I, all of us immigrated to the US and settled in New Jersey when I was around 9 years old in the mid 90s. My father used to work at Samsung, and he was transferred to the North American offices here in the Northeast for what was supposed to be 5 years, but we ended up staying put, and because our nuclear family were the only ones in the States, with our extended family all remaining in Korea, our community was really from our Korean church in the area. They really became our extended family. We would spend holidays like Thanksgiving, Father's Day barbecues with my parents' church friends. So, the church
I could
scenes,
so relate.
yeah, the church scenes in Minari really spoke to me.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Susan, exactly same thing. I can't imagine us starting out as immigrants like in the 70s without the Korean churches. So you made a really good point. Our whole life, like our whole community was based around churches. I believe that people got jobs that way, probably got married that way. So, and there's a lot of faith element to this movie as well. So,
yeah. And, I think a lot of people actually would come to the church not very religious at all.
Yeah.
Just seeking that community.
Friendship, community,
right. Yeah. But anyway, I think, from our bios and just this little bit of background, it seems like both of us got into our line of work in significant part due to our background and identities. So I think it would be great if we could share a little bit about how we got into the profession.
Yeah. I'm so intrigued by yours, Susan, because your whole life seems to be about immigration and immigrants. So this is such a great, topic, to have you. Yeah.
Well, as Tony alluded, my 1L summer, I was at DOJ fraud. My 2L summer, I was at Skadden. So it wasn't that I went to law school thinking that I was going to become an immigration attorney, but I did the immigration clinic, and it was such a life-altering experience for me. I think
it's probably so personal, right?
Yeah. So I represented a client who was actually the same age as me and had fled Mali to escape persecution based on his sexual orientation. And it felt like he was having to go through so many different hurdles to seek safety and a place here, when I came here just based on my dad's work and really sailed through the whole entire process. Samsung sponsored us for our green cards. So it's relatively easy for us to, find a way to stay permanently. And it really just highlighted for me the kind of unfairness baked into our system, and got me interested in the work.
And
so that's how.
And it's still happening, right?
Yeah.
Especially right now.
So that's how I got involved. And it wasn't actually really, I didn't think that I would be working so closely with Asian immigrants, but being based out of New York, where we do have a very significant Asian immigrant population, I've had the privilege of being able to serve my community as well. So how about you, Nancy?
I started in finance and corporate, and I really just wanted to go creative. So I got into Disney Channel, as Tony said, and, my background is pretty much entertainment. And as I grew, just up the corporate ladder, I really felt a sense of how do I get more fulfilled, and I need to kind of give back. I also feel like as Asian Americans, as 1.5 and second generations, I grew up in the LA riots here in Koreatown in Los Angeles, and I just felt like there was really not that much of a voice. So it's really been great to kind of create this social network of Asians in LA to be able to kind of give back to our community. And all of us here, Tony, Marie, and, this whole group, I feel like with everything that's happening, we really are in, places at the table, right? All these different leaders, policy leaders, and it's been really exciting to kind of see and how we can all like use our voice. So for me, it's been how do I help our community help others? And I'll tell you a little bit more about the Asians in LA story, but for me, it was just about like giving back to our community. So yeah, so let's start into it. Susan, I've got the first question for you. I know we're going to do a little back and forth, but you know, we keep hearing about the Asian model minority stereotype, and it's often depicted by the media. How is it like not telling the full story? So in what ways does the Asian model minority stereotype, often depicted by the media, not telling the full story, Susan?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is one of the central issues and problems facing our community now. I think the stereotype, a lot of people in recent years have become aware of the many ways, especially in the professional area, how it can be harmful. You know, there's the image of AAPI folks being hardworking, but not necessarily creative, or maybe not leadership material. But another way that I think it really negatively impacts our communities is by, like you said, representing us as this monolith and it not capturing the chronic issues that really affect us and obscuring them so that they're not recognized and addressed. So for example, I think some of the biggest issues affecting our communities is that Asian Americans have actually the greatest income inequality of all race groups in the US. And here in New York, at least, Asian Americans have a greater percentage living under the poverty line. And that's something that folks don't recognize because they often picture this image of professional Asian Americans that are high income earners. And another, I think, problem that I wish personally got more representation and attention is that Asians are the fastest growing undocumented racial group in the US. Nearly 1 in every 7 Asian immigrants are undocumented, and they make up 15% of the whole undocumented population in the US. And it's been really hard to break that traditional narrative of how immigration reform is really a Latinx issue and not a Black immigrant issue, a Asian immigrant issue. And
we're also the fastest growing group in the nation, period, right? So
and the fastest growing voting bloc. So
yes, and we made a difference in
I think we especially made a difference in Georgia, which was very exciting to see. But yeah, so I think, you know, those types of things really, that image gets in people's heads, and these types of issues can't get the type of policy attention that they deserve.
We're making changes though, so.
Yes. So my first question for you is, you're the API publicist for Minari. If you could tell us a little bit about how you got involved and what the experience was like for you.
Okay. It has been a roller coaster ride. It has been extreme highs and lows. I got involved in early November of last year when nobody ever heard of Minari. And I came about it because of my entertainment PR background and also my partners. Grace Hill Media is like the largest faith media agency, and they've worked with A24. So A24 is the production company, and they have co-produced this with Brad Pitt's Plan B production company with Christina Oh, and it has been such a journey for me in so many ways. I remember seeing Minari for the first time, and the first, you know, besides crying, because it's so related to my parents and our struggles. But I just felt like hashtag this is our story. Like that was just so clear in my mind. And I've never said that about any movie. And I think you guys that have watched it will probably feel the same way. And it doesn't matter if you're Korean American or Asian American or an immigrant, anybody who has a family or parents or have seen, the struggles of the American dream and the sacrifice of our parents can relate to this movie. And I think that's what speaks to how and why this movie has just taken off all the way to Oscars. Christina Oh, who was nominated for the first Asian American producer and for Best Picture for the recent Oscars. She started this because of Stephen Yeun, and he kind of said, "You got to read the script." And I think she fell in love with the script, and it's a kind of interesting story that from the script to how they landed at Sundance was like, I think less than a year or something like that. So it was such a quick process. I think everyone so believed strongly in this movie, and all of us as Korean Americans, there's so many in the production, the crew, the cast, the producers, to the casting, to even the, Harry Yoon is the Minari editor. It's so exciting to see so many Korean Americans and Asian Americans on this film, and to see where it ended up. So it won the top 2 Sundance Awards, and then it's just been a snowball effect after that. So we're very, very excited. So let's see. Susan, I've got a question for you. What current roadblocks still exist for AAPI immigrants, and what can we all do to help?
Yeah. I think your work speaks to this, just getting that story out there and getting folks to realize that, issues like income inequality and issues like immigration reform really deeply affect the AAPI community and Asian immigrant communities. I saw some statistics recently after the election about how, Asians are the fastest growing voting bloc in the country. Yet, when Asian Americans were asked, how many times have you been reached out by a campaign, or, how many times have you been reached out to be involved in this democratic process? The answers were really shockingly low. And I think just getting more and more representations of diverse Asian experiences out there can only help the public realize that, oh, right, it's not just, people who are a smaller minority. It's not just people who care about certain types of discrete issues. A lot of the issues that are really important to our political environment currently are also issues where Asians have a really important voice and story to tell.
Right. And it's representation everywhere, right, Susan? Yes. It's not only in media and Hollywood, but also in corporate boards and politics and, Yeah.
And one thing that I really appreciated about Minari was that it was it was a realistic representation in that it was largely in Korean. A lot of Asian immigrants have language access issues. Many of our, older generations have
still don't speak English
proficiency. And that's, I think folks need to recognize that English is actually not the official language of the US, and there are many homes with many different types of configurations and normalities. So that was really exciting for me to see.
Yeah, Minari is like 80%, in Korean language. And I think people kind of had this debate, like, would this movie work with, you know, who has like a Korean language movie? And I think, you know, Director Chung just really wanted to keep that authentic, because there's certain things, mannerisms and complexities with language that you just really can't kind of, you know, translate over. So it worked. And I think people could still relate whether you're Korean or not, because of the story was so good and so real. And there's this, you know, real authentic side. You know, there are chicken sexers, you know, in the middle of the country. And I think Stephen Yun, you know, had mentioned that his wife's family was a chicken sexer. Now, I haven't really heard of that coming from Los Angeles, but these are, you know, the kind of jobs that these immigrant families have to do to survive, you know, in middle America. So there's a lot of relevance and reality to this movie. And it is a personal, you know, story of Director Chung as well. So.
Yeah. So my second question for you is, Minari just won an Oscar, and that was a source of real celebration in my family.
Yes.
We're all very big Yoon Jung fans. So how important was this for the AAPI community and for representation in Hollywood?
I think it was huge. It was huge. You know, it's been so exciting. When Asians in LA started, you know, we were just a social network of Asian American influence, but we started and launched with Crazy Rich Asians. It's hard to believe that only a few years ago that this whole kind of like, you know, breaking records and breaking barriers was just recent. And we are in that ride and movement together, all of us as an API community. So to see movies like Crazy Rich Asians, you know, kind of start that. And then we had Searching with John Cho. We did a whole kind of like interview with him and really help promote this and push this. And then to see where Parasite went, where all of our Koreans all over the world were so excited, we really see that this is actually, you know, studios can make money off, you know, Asian American stories. And so Minari, we just got 6 Oscar nominations for the recent Oscars. I hope you guys all saw it. And 3 of them were record breaking for the API community. So the first one was Stephen Yun, was the first Asian American actor to be nominated for Best Actor since 1956, Yul Brynner in King and I, and 1982 for Gandhi, which is over 40 years. And that's hard to believe. I remember when I was doing the publicity for Minari, I, you know, wanted to, and I was reaching out to all the community leaders and all the organizations. I really like put that in my email. And there were people that were like, why is that important? And I couldn't believe that this is one of the reasons, because I said, and I fought so hard for this, I said, we are breaking records for our API community. This is huge for us. And I understood that because I worked behind and in front of the camera. And as a community leader, we are still trying to break those kind of records, right? And then the second, you know, Oscar nomination for Yoon Jung to be the first Korean performer ever to be nominated. That was huge. And I hope you guys all got to see the Oscars and her incredible speech with Brad Pitt. She's so awesome. Every time she does a Q&A, she makes people laugh because she just doesn't care. She's been through it all. And I think you and I, Susan, and probably Marie, have all grown up watching Yoon Jung, the Meryl Streep of Korea, like do her thing for so many years. She's such a familiar face. So to see her on that Oscar stage, to win this Oscar is just such an amazing feat for all of us, and even you guys like supporting Minari and having this watch party, every single one of us has contributed to this movement and momentum that we're creating. And then the third Oscar nomination was for Christina Oh, who is the first Asian American producer for Best Picture. And so all those things, just to be able to get the buzz that we did, to be able to promote this movie and have everyone just really support it. And I'm not talking about just Asian American. There were so many just American, you know, non-Asian press and people just excited about this movie. It was just wonderful to see. So yes, I'm so excited. Okay, Susan, let's see. I've got a question for you. Without giving away any spoiler alerts, in what ways do you think Minari tells an authentic portrait of immigrant families? And I know we kind of talked about it, but
yeah, I mean, I think we talked about it, many of the elements, the church thing, definitely. The other thing that really spoke to me, like on a very personal level, which again, as you said, I had never experienced in sort of, consuming popular culture before, was, my family immigrated fairly recently, and we immigrated to a part of the country where there were H Marts, there were, Asian grocery
I love H
stores,
Mart.
right? Yeah. But we still, to this day, we rely on our family and relatives from Korea to send us the real good stuff. And
just like the movie, Susan, without giving away spoilers. But okay, I think we could talk about this. Was it Yorichi, which is like the little anchovies,
and the red pepper
red
flakes.
Pepper, gochugaru.
Yeah, it's just not the same.
Remember, yeah, and like my mom, like literally would always bring those two items from like Korea and stink up that suitcase really good.
Yeah,
it was probably illegal.
Yes, yeah, probably, but it was definitely not declared at customs.
Yes,
and
so Korean.
Yeah. And I think, the other thing, New York City, New York State, we have been very, very focused on the census this past year, and we're very sad that we lost a seat. But one of the interesting data points to come out of the census this year has been that the fastest growing Asian immigrant population in the US are in the Dakotas.
Wow.
Obviously, the highest concentrations remain in California, New York, and Texas, but it's the Dakotas where they've had the fastest growing Asian population. And it just reminded me so much of this family just up and moving from California to Arkansas. We really are everywhere, and we should be telling those stories.
Yeah, and you're going to see it. A lot of you that haven't seen Minari will see, I think, without a spoiler alert, but they would go into a trailer in middle America and go on a chicken sexing farm, and just the heat and the struggles of being in Arkansas. And whether you're in your 40s or 30s or 50s, I mean, the struggles of our parents, not being able to speak, English language, and using, and kind of having that community of Korean churches. I think it's just going to be really exciting to watch in a few minutes when you guys watch it.
So I think this might be my last question for you before we move on to Q&A, but would love to hear what your most proud moment during this whole crazy Minari journey was for you.
I think, besides the Oscars, one of the most proud moment as a Korean American was, early in the process, I reached out to Council of Korean Americans and the Korean Consulate, and I really just, used all my networks and community organizations and nonprofits, and we all kind of pooled together. And, the tastemakers, which is like the influencers and policy leaders, entertainment leaders, and all that. But, early in the process, I was speaking to them, and they mentioned Korean American Day, and we were still kind of just in the strategy point. And they said, Korean American Day is January 13th. And I said, what? And I had heard about it, but I really didn't know what Korean American Day was. And neither had a lot of people all over the world or even America. And I looked it up on Google, and it said, celebrating, Korean American immigration to the United States. And I said, holy moly, this is meant to be. We have to do this. So we gathered over 5,000 leaders, AAPI leaders, Korean Americans, Asian American leaders, organizations, our partner communities, and we created Korean American Day for Minari. And it was January 13th. It was probably never been done. The press covered it. And one of the coolest things was, do you remember the whole like Capitol riot, building riots? Well, I had been trying to reach Congressman Andy Kim, who is the first Korean American Democratic congressman, and for weeks. And then the Capitol riots happened. Well, the next day after the Capitol riots, and you guys probably have seen the viral photos of Congressman Andy Kim cleaning up the Capitol building, which meant so much to all of us as Korean Americans. His office reached out to me and said, "Hey, we got your email about Minari and we wanted to kind of talk about this." And I was like, "What are you talking about? You guys are dealing with such an important emergency situation. Don't worry about this movie." And they said, "No, we want to help." So we said, "Okay, great. Would you be interested in being involved in Korean American Day? We've got over 5,000 leaders all watching this at the same time." And they were so gracious and they said yes. And then we asked a bigger favor. We said, "And would you mind asking Congresswoman Marilyn Strickland, who is the first Korean American Congresswoman, to possibly participate with us?" And they said yes, graciously, right after all that stuff happened in the riots. So it's such an amazing thing to have them introduce Minari on Korean American Day, January 13th, 2021. And we had people from all over the world, Korea, Japan, all over, Singapore, watching Korean American Day. And Sandra Oh was moderating the panel. And she had this beautiful moment. And I wish you guys could all see it, but this Q&A was never going to be aired again. But she was crying. And she had a moment with Stephen Yeun and the cast, because she said, "Stephen, like, this today is Korean American Day. And we are Korean Americans. And we are watching a Korean American immigrant story together on Minari." And we are all crying. And you can imagine, and it's really, for me as a Korean American, like one of my proudest moments. And they said that we really raised, the Korean American Day all over the world. Like, people have now heard about it, understand what the meaning is. So that to me is a quite personal like accomplishment and something I'm really proud of. And Susan, I think I have one more question for you. Can you describe the immigration history of Asians to the US and what ways they might not have been welcomed to the US? I just feel like you're such an expert, so we'd love to hear this from you.
Yeah, I mean, like, how can I count the ways? I think, sorry, I'm a crier. And when you described that story, I got a little font. So that's why I'm rubbing my eyes
cries in like 2 hours when they watch the movie. So you're not alone. I think there were a lot of tears.
Yeah, but so I think,
Susan.
I think what I remember the most is that, it was really Asian Americans that was the first racial group that was targeted for immigration restriction in the country. And that wasn't fully lifted until 1965. And that's why Asian immigrants have been, obviously there's been a whole history since the, 1800s, but the reason the numbers have gone up so exponentially in the recent decades is because there had actually been a law restricting our entry. And even beyond that, just the definition of who gets to be an American, who gets to call themselves a citizen, those cases, especially at the Supreme Court, have mostly been litigated around Asian Americans. So Chinese Americans, Japanese Americans, Indian Americans. And you can see throughout the case precedent, the creative ways that the court comes up with to say, no, we actually just mean white. We just mean, I think the progression was, we mean Caucasians. And then an Indian American immigrant sued to say that I should be able to naturalize because India is actually part of Caucasia. And the ruling was, oh no, but when we say Caucasian, you must understand it comes part and parcel with a historical understanding that means, a white people. So I think it is really, I wish there was more taught in not just law schools, because these are, you know, precedential cases. I guess if you take immigration law, you will get exposure to them, but I wish it was taught a lot more in primary and secondary schools.
Yeah, that's why this APAM, which is Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, is so important this month, right, Susan?
Yes.
I think we really need to understand our history. Asians in LA was, involved with Asian American series on PBS, and like over a year ago or a year and a half ago now with COVID. And when they were kind of talking about this first series, they said, oh my gosh, like, we're going to use this series because there has not ever been a show on Asian American history. Can you believe that? Like, it's never been done before. And there are a lot of colleges and universities that don't even teach Asian American history as like in the curriculum. So we're going to use this series to kind of launch that, to be able to educate our, Americans about our history for the first time ever, which is so crazy to me in 2021. So, and I'm really proud because Asians Lay, our next campaign is going to be the very first Asian representation in Hollywood research study with the Gina Davis Institute. Yes, and we're going to be working with the studios, and we're just launching this right now, and working with content creators, major networks and studios, so we can really change diversity and representation in Hollywood. So lots of things to do. There's so many great things that have come out of all these Asian hate crimes right now. Unfortunately, there's been horrible things, but because of BLM and, the hate crimes now, for the first time, I feel like it's our time that we're getting, a spotlight on our community, as you can see throughout all of media. And we're going to see a lot of change, and a lot of great foundations like the Asian American Foundation, Stand With Asian Americans, and things are kind of popping up. But I think we are almost done. So I'm going to turn it over to Tony for Q&A.
Thanks, Nancy. Well, we have some time before we start our watch party. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or just ask.
Come on in, anybody.
Yeah, I think you can.
Whether it's like Minari.
You can unmute, or you could put it in the chat.
Yeah.
If that makes you feel more comfortable.
Yep. But this talk can go on forever. I mean, I'm so enjoying like learning about, immigration from Susan. She's such an expert. So I hope you guys enjoyed this this conversation, but please feel free to ask any questions that we might be able to answer.
I'll jump in with one. Is that okay, Tony?
Of course, go ahead.
Of course.
Hi, thank you. It's not fully formed yet. I hope that this gives other people a chance to have better questions than I'll ask. But I'm a fourth generation Filipino child of immigrants from Hawaii, and first in my family to go to college, first generation, my cousins and I. And I think what's interesting in the films that you listed, right, from Crazy Rich Asians to Parasite to Minari, like there's been intense class discussion in the films in a way that I don't think general films that I see on a normal basis include. And I think what's really important about them, right, even Crazy Rich Asians, which is kind of satirical, right, and I worked in Singapore for 2 years before law school, and I have friends there
crazy
who were very
right
upset. Right.
Yeah.
We were very,
we're on a whole different level.
Exactly. And it's like, people were upset by the depiction of Singapore as being this, only this, and not really talking about the real class experience for most people in Singapore. But I think with Minari, it sounds like, I haven't seen it yet, it sounds like it's going to be not that way. And Parasite was purposefully trying to show tension. And so I'm just curious, for either from an immigration law perspective or from your personal experience of what's in the media, Nancy, and like what people are able to put and depict in film. Do you think that, and Nomadland having just one, right, showing like this other kind of angle on class in white middle America, I'm wondering if these kind of conversations seem more viable now, and why, if so. It seems like the big thing that we'll have to grapple with as a nation, given post-Trump, the experience of those who are coming from poor, racially white backgrounds, trying to clash with, like, does this require us to be conservative if we are poor? What does it mean to have kind of intersectional understanding and solidarity across classes and across races and immigration statuses?
Thank you so much for sharing that. I thought that was a great question and discussion all in one. Really, I think we're all, dealing with COVID, and COVID has definitely affected and changed all of us. And I hope it has, it's really like just kind of put a spotlight on all the things that we should change. And there's just so much. That's why movies like Nomadland might not have worked before, but now people can so relate to this. And that's why I felt like Minari, it's an incredible story, but it really was this perfect storm. Like, it's after Crazy Rich Asians, Parasite, and all this. And our country is in a place of deeper meaning and kind of introspective, and also about family. And, when you have just great storytelling, it doesn't matter if it's a crazy rich story or kind of a personal, middle America, poor immigrant story. I think so many of us can relate. And having these kind of successes in the box office now proves to studios these simple stories like Nomadland and Minari can still make a lot of money for them, but also be incredible storytelling that really depicts the reality of what is happening in our country today. And so I think having this kind of exposure and wins in the Oscar really is going to shift. You're seeing a lot more Black films. You're seeing a lot more Asian films. I mean, just in the last couple of weeks and months, we're seeing like Netflix, Amazon, everybody is now on board to really change representation in Hollywood. And speaking of intersectionality, this Gina Davis Institute, which is the leading research institution, that works with all the studios, and I'm so excited to be a part of that, is going to be studying the 6 sections of intersectionality, whether it's LGBTQ, race, gender, weight, age. I mean, it's so great because you can't look at it from one, bias to another. It really is like, how is that intersectionality of all those different things, and kind of fighting those tropes and stereotypes for Asian Americans, which, can you believe in 2021, it's going to be the first one of its kind? Like, it's mind blowing. So hopefully with all this change and with all this kind of like social justice and everything that we're dealing with, and we're going to see a different, TV and movies in the next, in the future with more of us. Thank you.
Tony, I don't know if you see the question in the chat.
Yes. So should we start with I think the first one is, it says it's not quite an immigration question, but we're just wondering where things actually stand with AAPI data disaggregation progress and requirements that had started under the Obama administration. It's not clear if whether they've been reversed during the previous administration or if they've been reinstated yet. I don't know. I know, Susan, do you have any?
I'm going to let Susan take that one.
Yeah, I actually, I'm not sure as well. I feel like there has definitely been, there's a organization called AAPI Data that does incredible work, and they were started to address this question of, we're not a monolith, and in fact there's so much disparity between different ethnic groups within that big, broad Asian American category. So that's been my source. Most of that, yeah, I'm not sure whether that was reversed during the previous administration. Hopefully, with this administration, if that was the case, it would revert back. And the census data that's along racial and ethnic and more community-based lines is not being released until around August. So we won't have that data set until a little bit later in the summer.
Yeah, AAPI Data is a partner of ours, Susan. Karthik, he's actually the California
Oh,
API commissioner, and we're
that's
kind of partnering on
amazing.
this. Yeah, and I just so, and he's really close with Manjusha from A3PCon, who is the founder of Stop AAPI Hate. So we've got all these incredible leaders, really making a difference, whether it's in research or on the front lines and, working as community leaders to really make a change.
Nancy, I think we have one for you from Sanon.
Trying to read that, yeah.
I'm a trained musicologist, Beethoven sketch specialist, and also teach an
Amazing.
undergraduate class on Asian representation in film at the Peabody Conservatory. I've already seen Minari and plan on including the film in the syllabus in the fall. I'm also a Korean American who grew up in Shawnee, Oklahoma, Brad Pitt's hometown. Does Nancy know what drew him to Minari, the representation of that part of the US, perhaps?
Unfortunately, just like Yoon Jung, I have not met Brad Pitt. But Sonny, I just took a picture of your question because I would love to talk to you a little bit more about the Asian representation and in your class and, talking about Minari as well. I don't know Brad Pitt's affiliation, but I do know a little bit about Christina O's affiliation. And, like I said, Minari is really kind of a personal story of director Lee Isaac Chung's kind of story and his immigrant story. And I think Christina O, she had been kind of, been pitched all these different immigrant stories, and then she really felt compelled to do this one. So I would have to say that Christina O is really like, the leader of this Minari movement, representing Plan B. I don't know Brad Pitt's personal involvement, but I'm sure, Plan B was also involved with Okja, which I'm sure you guys, Bong Joon-ho's film, and kind of seeing that success of that, I'm sure, made it a little bit easier to pitch Minari, but when Plan B pitched to A24, everybody was just all on board. And I'm sure Brad Pitt and Dee Dee Kleiner and, all the producers there Plan B just really kind of supported it. It's been a really kind of hashtag Team Minari movement from all of us from the very beginning.
That's great. I think we might have time for just one more question, and this is from Jennifer Chin. Do either of you have any concrete suggestions for what people can do to more actively support the AAPI community?
Absolutely. Right now, there are so many great newly formed foundations. I would look up the Asian American Foundation, TAF. They just had a great webinar. I mean, 3 presidents were on it. So there's so much support from the overall community to be able to mobilize and really make a difference. And I think there's going to be a lot of changes, whether it's representation in media, in Hollywood. I'm currently, in talks with Stand with Asian Americans, which is another kind of nonprofit that's forming, and they took all the API business leaders. So, for me, it's always been about entertainment, community, and policy. You need all 3 to make a difference, and it's so interrelated. We all have to work together, whether it's nonprofit or community leaders or entertainment leaders or policy leaders, right? Like you see the whole kind of pattern and movement from beginning to end, because we need to, start with the grassroots, and we need to have more representation in Hollywood and movie and TV. And also we need to change policy, right, Susan? So it's really working with all these different leaders, but yeah, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely support your, national, but also local Asian American associations. I think if you're in the New York City area, Mingkwon Center for Community Action, my home organization, is an excellent one. I also think in terms of policy, these are obviously coming from my personal background and views, but again, Asian immigrants make up a big part of the undocumented population, especially the dreamer or documented population. A lot of our young people are covered by that policy, and any pathway to citizenship would be a huge boon to our community. And the other thing I think folks may not immediately make the connection is the sort of infrastructure discussion around the care economy that President Biden has started. A lot of Asian women, especially our elderly women, you'll see in Minari, the grandmother comes to be a caretaker for free. And this is essential labor. And so many of the women in our families have stepped up to be in that full-time caretaking position with no recognition and no real valuation of their labor. And that, I feel like, is going to make a huge change for properly valuing our AAPI women's labor, especially folks in that domestic sector.
And please join us on at Asians in LA Facebook group. We use social media as a tool to be able to inform, inspire, and influence together. So we are constantly, posting about movies like Minari and everything that's happening in our community, not only locally in Los Angeles, but nationwide. When Atlanta had their shootings, we were able to kind of help Korean American Coalition. Those are our partners as well. So it's really great to use social media as a tool to kind of see what's happening in our community. There's so many great nonprofits, like Susan said, and that ways that you guys can get involved, whether it's a donation or volunteering your time and getting involved with our communities is really appreciated. Okay, Tony.
Oh, wonderful. And Nancy, Susan, it's been a really lovely conversation. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And
I'm so excited you're all getting to see Minari. So enjoy the movie. I just want to say yay.
Yes, and please
Get
have
your
a
Kleenex.
box of tissues. Yeah.
Yes, I was just
going to
say, get your Kleenex and